I think being a tenant in 2025 is the hardest it's ever been. But bashing landlords does not help the situation, believe you me.
The government regulations become so excessive. Maybe it's time actually to move to operating below the radar.
A lot of young people are struggling to buy a house at the moment. What would you be telling them?
Find the bank of mum and dad.
How would you describe being a landlord in 2025?
A disaster.
It's like the government's got some agenda that, where's it all coming from?
I think the profession and the word landlord is dated. It should be housing provider.
What challenges are facing the industry at the moment, would you say?
Trying to make money,
Yeah.
I think, and trying to do the right thing by tenants and still make a margin.
I'm going to have to sell some property. I've just had to take 2 loans out to pay my tax.
Gosh.
Because it's the double whammy of not being allowed to take off the mortgage relief and the mortgages going up. So I've got properties that don't make any money.
I've been a landlord for 42 years now.
Wow.
The changes that have been made, what can I say? As long as you abide by the rules and you respect your tenants, I don't see any problem.
Well, let's start using your new term now. How long have you been a housing provider for?
I became an accidental housing provider in 1994. I was skint. I had to rent my property out. I've only got. I don't have a lot of property at all.
How much is not a lot?
2 properties.
Right.
Yeah. So am I driving a Bentley or a Porsche? No.
You said you have a few properties. How large is your portfolio?
I have 10 properties in total.
That sounds like more than a few.
Yes.
And then how large is your portfolio, would you say?
Yeah, large enough for us.
What does that mean?
What does that mean? Well, yeah, more than one, less than a few more. No, it's 5, 6 plus.
Excellent. How long have you been in the industry for?
Probably 30 years.
Wow. And
Yeah.
then do you have a large portfolio?
I've got 8 properties.
And then are you looking to offload all of those?
2 to start with. Then we'll see if the situation continues, and then I'll probably have to get rid of a couple more.
1983 I started, I bought my first property.
How much was that property worth?
That was worth at the time £43,000.
That seems ridiculous these
It
days.
seems ridiculous, but don't forget the wages are also a lot smaller than what it is today.
And they're talking about growth and we're going to cut out bureaucracy. And I think, what are they talking about? They're introducing the Renters' Rights Bill. And that's just absolute bureaucracy. The rogue landlords will carry on. And I actually admire, I don't know, sometimes the rogue landlords. You hear about people living in sheds and you go, oh, isn't that terrible? But they know they're living in a shed and they're paying 50 quid a week, but they know it. So the rogue landlords are actually starting to bring homeless. And it's just this sort of madness. I sometimes think, when is the point come when you actually think the government regulations become so excessive? Maybe it's time actually to move to operating below the radar. And it's like, it's all right in wartime to operate below the radar, but then in peacetime you've got to it's all just a massive money collecting exercise.
What challenges would you say landlords are facing in 2025?
Well, it's clearly a combination of the change in the renters' right to rent bill and all the aspects of that. But what makes the whole thing, I think, extremely challenging is the fact that that then coincides with the changes to the requirements for dwellings to conform to extremely high energy standards. And you can argue about the right to renters' rights bill, and I agree with a lot of it actually, and that there shouldn't be. It's just you shouldn't be able to just evict somebody just because you want to put the rent up. And I think most good landlords, what they want is a good tenant, and a good tenant's worth its weight in gold. So I think that's less of the issue, but it's a very aggressive bill with lots of bureaucracy behind it, registration and all sorts of things, which increases the costs, and the background to just having a tenant just becomes more and more difficult. Now, if you overlay that with the requirements that they are consulting on at the moment, but relate to the energy performance standards, you really, I mean, I'm right on the edge as to whether I can continue. And I've been in this business for 50 odd years.
You'll have seen this week, it sounds like you're keeping up with the news. You'll have seen this week the cuts to people's disability benefits, the personal insurance payments. What have you made of that news story?
Well, to be honest, it doesn't really affect me because all my tenants are sort of working. But yeah, it's going to be tough. And it seems to be odd that it's coming under a socialist government. I mean, it seems like they're almost the same as the Conservatives. I mean, the Conservatives started all the cuts, and Labour are just carrying on. But yeah, so no, I think it's going to be tough for people. Yeah, very, very tough. But yeah, just need to grow the economy. And I think Ronald Reagan's right. Government is your worst enemy. Just let people get on with it. People are so creative, and they don't need government. The idea that government is going to generate growth is. You need a government to regulate things, but not to try and generate growth. Just let people get on with it. Yeah.
You sound quite fed up, if you don't mind me saying.
I am fed up with the government. Yeah. I think we've had 5 years of madness. I mean, for started with the lockdowns. I mean, that was just madness. Then it's like, compulsory vaccinations. That was all madness as well. It's just anyway.
You've got 2.74 million landlords, of which 85% of them have 1 to 3 properties. I think the Renters' Rights Bill addresses a lot of that with regard to decent home standards and being professional. Landlords will have to be part of a database and a redress scheme. And I think being a tenant, and you guys have said that you're tenants, I think being a tenant in 2025 is the hardest it's ever been. It really is, with regard to affordability and rising rents. But bashing landlords does not help the situation, believe you me. Because all that happens is you might have a good landlord. I see it time and time again because I run a company called Landlord Action. So obviously the banning of Section 21 is going to give tenants more rights and more security, but we are seeing a massive rise of landlords now serving Section 21s to get the tenant out and to sell the property. And of course you've got decent tenants that are being asked to leave properties where landlords may not have historically put rents up. Mm-hmm. So we're in the biggest change in 30 years in our private rental sector.
A lot of young people are struggling to buy a house at the moment. Mm-hmm. You said you own several flats. If you were giving someone in their 20s or maybe older advice on how to buy their first property, what would you be telling them?
Find the bank of mum and dad to get a deposit put down, because I think otherwise it's very, very difficult. I mean, it is extremely difficult. Of course, you could argue maybe more accommodation will come on the market by dint of landlords selling up. Mm-hmm. But you can never predict how those things work out and the pace of it, but it may happen. But at the moment, they have my sympathy.
My advice would be to do what I did. You buy there'll always be something if you save. I mean, I do think parents should help, and I think parents always have, and I think they do now. So, if you can't, so you save what you can, but you just buy the cheapest thing you can, anywhere that suits you to get on the market. I mean, then that's what I did years ago, and that wasn't cheap for me then, because people tend to think, that the houses were cheap then, but of course wages were less. So relatively, and also mortgage rates were higher then. So relatively, it's not as different as people think. And if you do that, and you don't say, but we must have the 3-bedroom house. If you have the little flat, or even the studio, it gets you started.
I believe you have to be frugal. Today, from what I see, again, from my hair, you can see I'm sort of the age. People today look at what I can get today. I can go to the coffee shop, I can get this, I want the latest phone and so on and so forth. So you don't actually put anything aside for tomorrow. My motto is, you enjoy life every day, but try and make an umbrella for yourself, because tomorrow it could be raining. And that's what I say. Yes, it is difficult because the prices are quite high. And when you compare them, obviously, with the wage, depends what job you have, it's going to be very difficult. So why don't you start with a small flat somewhere and then expand from there onwards? But When you buy that flat, you work out your economics. You try, so if your mortgage is, for instance, I don't know, just silly figure, 500 a month, why don't you put 510? So don't go to the pub one day.
Are your tenants aware of you looking to offload these properties?
Yeah. Two of them. Yeah, one's already had a Section 21. And the other problem is councils and the whole system encourages people to want you to evict them. Goodness knows where they're going to go and what the council are going to give them. So instead of encouraging landlords to keep tenants, making it easier for us, they just tell you to evict them.
That must have been a difficult conversation or a difficult experience serving your tenants with the Section 21. Can you talk us through that?
Well, in a funny way, it's not, because they still seem to think the council will give them a nice home. So I've only, in all the years, I did one a few years ago and she wanted to be evicted. And the one I've just done recently, she seems to think she'll get something. She's quite happy to be evicted. Another place, I'm hoping they'll either buy the flat or I think they're in a position to buy something else, so that's okay. I've got another house, because of the new renters regulation, the new law, I was quite happy to leave them in. The place needs doing up. Bought it as it is, but it needs to be done up. But if I wanted them to leave and say, well, I'm going to do this up now, I wouldn't be able to. With the new rules, because I wouldn't be selling it or putting a family member in, I can't ask them to leave so I can upgrade my property.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I think it's ridiculous. You know, you can't move forward. You're being told to upgrade properties, etc. And sometimes you just need to move on and do something different with it. Well, if you have no options, that just limits everything. And that's another person I'm going to have to ask to leave, which I wouldn't do normally. I'd leave them there till I'm ready, because I'm not really ready to do that job. But now I might have to do that before the new renters bill comes in.